name's Todd Gordon. I currently live in Okoboji and I am retired. I retired 3 years ago after 37 years in education. And the last 19 of that, I was an athletic director and activities director, coached for about 30 of those years. I spent my time in a lot of different schools. My path was one that we moved around, and grateful for that in a lot of ways, which I may touch on at some point as well. But I do admire those administrators who land somewhere and they stay there and they spend 30 years. And I think that's great. That wasn't my calling. That wasn't my path. And I think it's important to realize there's a lot of different ways to do this. And there's obviously a lot of different places to do this. The important thing is that I think each administrator knows what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and use those accordingly. And sometimes those strengths will cause you to move around a little bit, but that doesn't mean you have to either. Your strength may be landing someplace, and my goodness, I know so many people who landed someplace as a teacher and then just kind of gradually work their way up to some sort of administrative position in the same school. And I think that's fantastic. It's your road is going to be your road, and it's going to be different than others. And I think that's what makes education so unique and such a fantastic opportunity. I started in 1985. I started in Walnut, Iowa, which is now part of AHSTW with Avoca and Shelby Tennant. And I was there for 2 years, and then went out to Lisbon, Iowa, in the eastern part of the state, just above Iowa City. And I was out there for 2 years, and then came back to Manning, where I spent 10 years teaching and boys basketball coach there from 1989 to 1999. And then my first little stint in administration was actually at a small Christian college in Nebraska, Nebraska Christian College in Norfolk. I actually was born there in 1962. And so I spent 2 years there as the athletic director, dean of students, and men's basketball coach, and also taught some courses there, some education courses on the campus there. But then felt like my calling was actually to be back in the high schools. And so I went to Harlan Community High School. I was the girls basketball coach there, and I taught. And that's where I really started to probably get into more of I helped my good friend Mitch Osborne, who's a Hall of Fame basketball coach there, and a good friend. I helped him a lot with his athletic director duties. I just kind of got involved. He got me involved. And that led to my first job as an athletic director and activities director and trainer in Southwest Iowa. And I was there for 7 years and did a little coaching there. I was teaching part-time, about 4 hours a day in the phys ed department, but there's AD as well. And then I got my first full-time administrative job in Carlisle, just southeast of Des Moines, a 3A school, and was fortunate to be the first full-time AD they hired there. And I was there 3 years, and then went to Des Moines Roosevelt in the Des Moines public school system. And I was the activities director, administrator at Des Moines Roosevelt for 4 years. And that was a real learning experience for me as well, in a lot of ways. And but then I wanted to end it probably in a little bit smaller school setting. I consider myself a small school guy at heart. And so I went to Greene County in Jefferson, Iowa, and was there 3 years before I retired. And I was fortunate there too to be the first full-time athletic director and activities director that they hired as well. So that's my path. And I was fortunate to have a very loving and understanding wife who was good at packing up and moving. We have 3 kids, and I think they learned a lot through our moves as well. They've learned how to make friends and how to really start anew sometimes. And so I think they grew as people too. And I can see that in their lives now as well with what they do and how they do it. They seem to be really good with people, and they can get along with a lot of different people. So I think our family benefited as well. And just moved up to Okoboji full time about a year ago. We've had a place up here for 8 years, but I currently work for Bound. And if anyone's in the school familiar with the, started as statistics, it was, Bound. And that's where all the coaches put their stats. But now, if you're in any Iowa school, you probably know us as helping with your scheduling and ticketing and everything else in the athletic department. And I work with about 40 schools. I'm kind of their liaison, and I kind of work with them directly with the athletic director and the coaches, helping them. So that's what I'm doing now, and I'm able to do it remotely. And I'm about 3/4 time, part-time to 3/4 time. I can still get out and play golf when I want to, when it's nice, and do things like that. So that's kind of what my journey has been. And again, just blessed to have all the opportunities I had in everything from a small school to, Roosevelt with 2,500 kids walking the hallways, urban to suburban. It just kind of had the whole thing. And the multi-high school format is definitely interesting. When you talk about Des Moines Public School and 5 high schools and 30 middle schools and everything else that they have. That's not all the middle schools. I guess that's elementary, but it's just a different dynamic, and it's corporate school, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people are there and they thrive, and I enjoyed it. I loved Roosevelt, loved the kids that we had, but corporate school wasn't for me in the long run. And but I'm grateful for the experience. I think that's what every experience can lead you to something else, and it leads you to have that experience with you as well. And I don't think any of that is wasted. As you start your journey in administration, I think everything that you do will have a purpose, and that purpose is to make you better and to make you a better person and administrator, and you'll have great insights because of that. What I'm going to do now, Lucas and Matt and Brian, and then anybody else, I'm just going to kind of go through the topics that Trent gave, and just kind of I wrote down some highlights. I think some things I want to share, and
that sounds great. That sounds great, Todd. I really
okay.
appreciate you giving us that vast background, so that we can hear about the small school, the big school, even the college piece in there, that allowed you to get so many different experiences that served you well. So yeah, go ahead to the talking points, and we'll take questions as we go.
Yeah. And these are, I worked for a lot of different principals, and I worked for a lot of different superintendents, and I worked for some good ones and some that were, okay, but they did their job, and they were just. And sometimes when you're athletic directors are middle management, that's what we are. We are, we're kind of in between, and I think that's how I always approached it, is just a middle management approach. I'm not really in charge of everything. I have people that oversee me, but I oversee, the coaches and the directors as well. So that's my lens, I think, from an athletic director, activity director standpoint, is just kind of middle management type of thing. The first topic here, advice to the graduate students as they prepare for their program. I think the biggest thing that I would suggest that you do is gosh, you see situations all the time in school, whether you're teaching or you're doing some format of administration, but you see things handled. You see things, a problem arise or situation arise, whether it be with a principal and teacher, principal and student, teacher, student, but you think about how those things are handled and what you observe in that, and then just kind of process inside, not so much outside, but inside, what would you have done differently in that situation, if anything, or if it was handled in a very effective way, what do you learn from that? What do you learn from it being handled either negatively or positively? But just think about what you would have done if it wasn't quite handled the way you thought it might be, and just maybe put that away. I think anything you can do as a teacher to help your current admin team is a plus. It's just it's experience. You just can't make up for experience, and that's sometimes putting yourself in situations, volunteering, whether it be at a game supervision as an AD. Anytime anyone would help us supervise, it was great. Um, and obviously we had some, if you had games where you're hosting a tournament game, you need extra help. But anything you can do to just be a part of that admin team, even on a volunteer basis, just to help supervise, you're getting practice, either talking with students, talking with parents. You may not be in charge of the whole thing, but there's you're just getting experience, and I think that's important, especially when you go to interview for a job. If you have stepped out and been a part of that, that's a good thing to be able to do. The biggest thing to prepare, I mean, I know it's a broken record, you hear it all the time, but just work on developing relationships. It's a relationship driven business, and it's with your students, with parents, with coworkers, with staff, with the kitchen staff, with the janitorial staff, whoever is there, transportation, bus driver, everybody involved in the school. Just develop those relationships. And I think if I if I could give one big piece of advice on that, is just get involved with that support staff. Know who they are, and uh, don't forget about them. I have seen administrators, teachers who look negatively on support staff, and it does not bode well for them. Um, so really just develop relationships with everybody who is a part of that school, and just continue to do that. And, honestly, you have to develop those relationships with people who you may not like and who may be a thorn in your side. But I think I have seen too where that thorn in the side can become the biggest advocate for a administrator or a teacher or a coach, if you just continue to try and develop that relationship with some grace and some understanding. I just always try to look at what that person, where are they coming from? And if they're angry and if they're always upset about something, well, there's a reason for that. And it's usually not you. So don't take it personal. They're upset with a lot of different things. And sometimes the administrator, the coach, the teacher, we're the point person, and we just kind of have to take it. And so don't take it too personally. But those are the people that I think can also become your biggest advocate. I had those people at different stops in my career, whether it was a parent, whether it was a teacher, whether it was a coach, who started out, it was a little bit rough and it was a little bit rocky. But if you just continue to develop that relationship and show up and support them, even when they may not support you 100%, I've seen that person come around to be a great advocate and even a friend in the end. But at least if you can get them to be an advocate and to be a part of the team, that's a win. And we're always after those wins. The second thing is about insights to landing that first administrative job. I think know what a good fit is for you. What kind of school are you looking for? What kind of administrator are you looking to work for? But know what a fit is. And yeah, there's times you may, to get your foot in the door in the administrative world, you may have to take a job that may not be your quote forever job, but it's experience. And but know what ultimately, what kind of school, what kind of community are you looking to be a part of, and keep an eye out for that, and make that your goal. And you may not get it right away, but I think if you continue to try and find that fit, you'll find it. And you may have to go a couple different paths, on a road to get there, but you can find it, and you'll be rewarded once you are. I think the biggest thing is I loved interviews. I loved being a part of the one who was doing the hiring of a coach or a director, but I also enjoyed myself interviewing, and I love preparing for the interview. So when you are going to go out for those interviews, do your research about the school, about the community, um, their successes. Just do your research. Be prepared. I've had coaches come in who really had no idea what they were talking about. They had no idea what our school was about. They had no idea what the community was about. And then I had other coaches who came in and they interviewed and they had done their research, and you can tell. And when you're having, if you're going to interview for a principal's job or an athletic director job, even a coach's job, you may be in front of 10 to 15 different people, and you may be in front of students. And if you can speak clearly about their school and they know you've researched that, that's a big plus. And go into the interview with a plan. I think I always wanted to hear that a coach or director had a plan. They had a vision. They knew what maybe had happened in the program or where it needed to go. And they came in with a plan for that. And I think the same is true for an administrator. You're not going to change everything in the first year, but if you have one or two things maybe that you can come in and make a direct impact on immediately that may need to get done, excuse me, that's a big plus too. But don't go in and try and change everything at once, and don't say you're going to change everything at once, because you can't, for one thing. But have one or two things, in the back of your mind that you want to do. The last three jobs I was at, Carlisle, Roosevelt, and Greene County, we did a total rebrand. I led a total rebrand of their logo and their fonts and everything else, their color schemes. Their color schemes pretty much stayed the same, but we led a total revamp of the logos at all three of those schools. And that's something I could I knew going into the interview that we needed to do that, and we wanted to do that. And so that was something I really tried to have at the front, that I say, I think we could, I think we can rebrand this a little bit and then make it something exciting. And so we were able to do that. And that's just something I knew I could change right away and work on. Now at Roosevelt, to be quite honest, you have a lot of Drake professors who have kids there and are tied to that school. So that was a challenge. We had the first Teddy Roosevelt come out, and he was holding a sword. And some lawyers at Drake said, well, we can't be showing weapons in, our logo. So we had to redo the logo, so it was a unique experience that way. And then, but it was something fun we could do. So just try and highlight something you might be able to change and go in with that as well. The last thing I would just say is, say what you're going to do and then do what you're going to say. That's just an old adage. And don't say more, kind of, don't overpromise and underdeliver, underpromise a little bit and then overdeliver. So just be careful that you don't say too much, and then you're in trouble in year two. You didn't get much done, or year one, but just follow through with what you say you're going to do. I'll pause there. Any questions about any of those first two things? Let's me get a drink too.
Todd, I was going to ask you in your first part, and that's just great advice of watching how people handle things, or watch about certain situations as you're constantly thinking about, would I do it this way, or what would I do? It's kind of like you're an observer in a classroom, you're an observer of administration things. And we often talk about when you're a teacher observing, you learn more as the observation than the teacher does from being in there. That's just a wonderful example. Question for you, since now you're in bound and you're kind of out of it, as far as day-to-day grind of administration, do you still do that? Do you still look at situations and think what you would do?
Absolutely. I still talk with several young ADs, and I don't see it daily, but one of them that I mentor a lot is down in Spencer, and he's a great young AD, Taylor Chapman. And I go down there and I I help at the scorers table. I do the shot clock at basketball games. And I told him, I said, I'll come down and help, but I'm not supervising. I'm done supervising. I don't have to do that anymore, but I'll help you out anywhere you can. But, yeah, you just can't help it when you go into a school. And I go into schools, once in a while to see an AD or visit with an AD through my work with Bound. And it's just always with you. It's a part of who you are. It's the fabric of your, who you are, and you just can't help it. I don't offer advice unless it's wanted. I'm not that guy. I don't want to hear myself talk all the time. But if somebody asks about a situation, and you get those calls once in a while still from some of the younger ADs who, younger's now 40 and 50 to me, but everyone has situations, and I think I think that's a great point too, Lucas. I think just start building your network of friends who are administrators, and because those people, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but those people that you can call daily, weekly, monthly, hourly, some days, and bounce something off of them. So it's important people to have in your life and to really have a connection with.
I really appreciate you talking about the mentorship aspect and how you do that. That is key. I don't think everybody understands how important it is to recognize that not everybody can talk about the situations that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Most people can't relate. Most people have no idea. So it's nice to have somebody that you can call to just to say, hey, what do you think? Or I've talked to enough people that I'm starting to think I'm crazy. Am I on base here with what I'm suggesting?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You
Um,
got to have them. Got to have them. And I think because you just don't have, when you start, you know, when you're 40 years old and you're starting your administrative journey, or however old people are in this program, I don't know, they could be 30, but you just haven't had the experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a fact. But I think if you can have people you can talk to, you have to have people you can talk to. I don't think it's not an option to me. I just, you've got to have a network of people you can call and talk to, even just a vent, you know. And I think it's important that as people in this program start to grow and they go from mentee to mentor, you've got to, when you get to the mentor side of things, you can't be shy about speaking truth either. And sometimes that's going to be pointing out something that maybe they need to think about a different approach to, but you want to encourage them, but you've also got to speak truth into them as well. And, I think as you develop as an administrator, you learn how to speak truth with more grace than what you do when I was 40, I didn't speak with as much grace as I do when I'm 62. So you start to learn how to tell truth a little bit more gently, maybe.
Maybe that's called wisdom, Todd. I'm starting to think that might be what you're getting to.
It might be. It might be. It's called making mistakes and then trying to learn from them.
As you continue with the next points, since we talked about the mentorship aspect, I just think that's such a valuable thing. Do you want to talk do you want to talk a little bit about the mentors you had and how that helped you before you move on to the next talking points?
I'm going to get into it right now as I think about the best practices I've seen from principals. Those principals became my mentors, and I'm gonna tell you about the best practices with a story first. And it was 1990, and I was a young basketball coach in Manning, Iowa, and we were having an AAU practice in the gym, and it was after school, and so we hadn't started yet, but the principal walked in, and the kids are shooting from in Manning, if anybody's seen the Manning gym, there's a stairway that goes up, and then you go up in a balcony. Kids are shooting from the stairway. They're, throwing hook shots from half court. And, I just, I wasn't paying attention, or I didn't care, honestly. I thought, okay, they're eighth graders, they're spastic anyway, and we'll just let them do it. And so, they would just, it was probably chaos. And the next day I got called into my principal's office. Don Ringenberg was his name. And he said, Todd, you have a chance to be a good coach. But if you're going to let kids act like that in your gym, undisciplined, you're never going to make it. And so that didn't happen again. And I took that as advice. And I think it's just, you got a choice when you're confronted with something like that. You can dig your heels in and say, well, you're dumb. I'm not going to do that. I want to do it this way. Or you can think about it and think, you know what, he's right. And I need to get more control of that. The point is, he was honest with me. And he spoke the truth. And Don didn't always speak the truth in grace and love, but he spoke the truth. And, in 1990, you spoke differently than you do in 2025. And Don had been a teacher, in the 1960s and 70s, and there are stories about that from Denison High School that I won't even go into. But he was honest with me, and I think that's the number one thing I just always remember about, if you're going to be an administrator, you got to be honest, and you have to speak the truth for the betterment of the people that you lead and you support. The other thing, which is a story from Don, I don't remember what year it was. It's probably the first year, because here's this 27-year-old kid trying to find his way a little bit. And so it was a JV game on a Saturday morning, and I had a Diet Coke. Jim, I wasn't coaching, I was the head coach, so I was just watching, but I was at the scores table, and I had a Diet Coke. Well, things which you don't many people do now, but there was no pop, no soda, whatever you call it. There was none of that in the Manning gym in 1990. You couldn't bring it in, even at a game. You drank it out in the commons, but you didn't bring it into the gym, and they watched it. So here I am with my can of Diet Coke on a Saturday morning, and Don was there. I mean, Don was everywhere, but Don comes in and he sits behind me at the scores just very quietly. And he said, Todd, he said, you know the rule, you can't have pop in here. Yeah. He said, well, if our students and our parents can't do it, why should a coach be able to do it? Okay, you're right. So again, he was honest, but the other lesson is that rules are for everybody. They're for me as a teacher, they're for me as an administrator, they're for me as a coach. They're just not for the people who are on the, coming into the game. They're for everybody. And you set the example as a leader. And again, I just think, man, sometimes it's easy to let things go. He didn't. But those lessons, I mean, man, that's 35 years ago. And I remember it like I can remember both of those conversations like they were yesterday. And they didn't bother me. They made me better. And they taught me those lessons of being honest, and those rules apply to everybody. And you just consistent about that. And I think, those are lessons that I carried on for the next 35 years as well. Still to this day. I mean, I still believe that. So, be honest. The other thing, visible. I mean, golly, whether you're going to be a principal, assistant principal, administration, just be visible. I don't mean at every game. I don't mean, but just be around. I mean, being out in the hallway at passing time. Those can be the best 4 to 5 minutes every 50 minutes of your day, because you get to talk to kids, you get to talk to teachers, you can just make a quick conversation. And man, I loved being out of my office anyway, but just being out in that hallway, it just brings you some energy for the rest of the day as well. So just be visible, move around, don't be in the same place all the time. Man, I had a couple principals, I could predict where they were 8 hours out of the day. They're in their chair and they're in the office. And were they effective? They were okay. But the most effective ones I ever worked for and had, they're out. You can never find them. They're in a classroom and they're just walking through. But that's how you build those relationships too. You don't build it by sitting. You build it by being out. And the other thing that really good principals did for me from an athletic director standpoint is they helped me. And there were times I had a couple principals, especially late in my career, they would say, "You take the night off. I'm going to cover this," and they would cover a game, and that was very therapeutic because, as an AD, you can be 4 or 5 nights a week, and very easily with concerts, especially in the spring, concerts and different games and activities, and they just add up. And the schools I was at, we hosted a lot of games we weren't playing in, and so those add up. You're there for those. So if you have a principal who will say, "We got this," or superintendent, I had a superintendent who'd do the same thing. They'd say, "We'll cover this tonight, and you just go out and take Deb out and go out and have a meal, or just kick your feet up at home, but you don't have to be here." And I hated it because I loved watching our kids play and I loved watching our coaches coach. But there's times you just have to be able to step away as well. We had in the 2018-19 school year, I was president of the Iowa High School Athletic Director Association. And during that time, I did a survey during my time as president, and just to track the change in schools. And during that year, we had 76 changes in athletic directors in Iowa schools. And that's, roughly a third of the schools, maybe. Some left, some are changing jobs within there. There were some that went back to being an assistant principal or being a different administrative role. What we found, and I think this is good data for me, I think it's probably still true. If we could get athletic directors through year 3, then we might be able to hang on to them and they can make that a career. But getting them through those first 3 years, especially if they're in a small school where they're teaching 6 hours a day, and they may get 1 hour a day to be the AD, or 2 if they're lucky. But if we could get them through 3 years, then we felt like then they could go on and make that kind of a career. And so that's where that help from the other administrators on the team really comes into play, especially in a small school. And I know that everyone is taxed. I mean, man, you're the principal, you're the transportation director, you're the curriculum director. There's so many roles that go into it. In a small school, there just aren't that many people. And but if you can get a team that can help that young AD get through it, they can be an administrator for life. And maybe they go on to do something else administrative wise, but you got to try and keep them in it. We don't want to lose them. We lose good people too many times, just not ADs, but principals as well, who have a chance, but maybe they haven't had the mentorship or they haven't had the support of people in the upper management to help that middle management person to lift them up. And that's important for us to be able to do. The other thing that, even though Don Ringenberg was very honest with me, I wasn't the athletic director there, but as a teacher for him, he never micromanaged at all. The good ones don't micromanage. They don't want to be a principal and an AD. And so they didn't micromanage myself. Even as a full-time administrator, there's places where a superintendent might want to get into the AD world. And a lot of that is, there's a chain of command that I always try to talk about. Number one, in the AD world, the parents or the students should talk to the coach. We want to teach our kids how to talk to adults and how to have those conversations if things aren't going well. Why am I not playing? Well, that shouldn't jump from parent to superintendent. That's not the chain of command. We want the student to talk, And I always had the student involved in every conversation all the way up the ladder. The student was always there. And it's funny, a parent would call, well, I want to talk to the coach. Okay. What has your student talked to the coach? Well, no, I'm going to talk to the coach. No, your student is going to talk to the coach. And then, all of a sudden they're calling the principal. Well, your AD said I can't talk to the coach. And if that principal and that superintendent believed in that chain of command, problem solved. But I also had a principal who didn't always believe in that chain of command. They jumped to him. And once parents know that they can jump to that principal, forget it. That's the chain of command's done then, because parents know they can jump right to the principal and jump over that athletic director and the coach. I always want to solve the problem at the lowest level, and that's with the student and the coach. And so that chain of command, the best principals, best superintendents I worked for, they believed in the chain of command, and we had that locked solid at the school. Excuse me. Any questions on any of that? Not, I'll get on to just the wisdom, I guess, that I gathered through years of leadership, school leadership. And I think 5 things that I'm going to point to in this, I wrote down that I really believe in. And to be honest, I write, I have a book, I write a weekly newsletter, and I usually post something on leadership and about every day. I do something. I've got a Facebook page that I post on, but I wrote this the day I retired 3 years ago. And this is what I shared after. The tide level was 13,505, because that's how many days I was in education in those 37 years. And so this is the wisdom that I gathered through those 37 years. Number 1 is be as consistent as you can in your decision making. Just be consistent. Be consistent in your demeanor, be consistent in your attitude, and be consistent in your effort, because the effort is watched as much as anything. But just the consistency that you make decisions is paramount. And just try to be consistent in that. I said consistent a lot in that phrase, didn't I? Secondly, be patient. I wasn't as patient early as I was late. If I was we did a podcast for about 5 years. Scott Jarvis spoken on here yet? Maybe he's next week. But Scott will come on, and Scott Jarvis and myself and Aaron Stecker, who's AD at Cedar Rapids Kennedy, did a AD podcast. We started the podcast in 2019 when we were losing so many people, and we wanted to do something to encourage athletic directors. So we talked a lot about, athletic director issues, had athletic director guests. We did that for 5 years. And but one of the things that we talked about was very good. You'll love him. If you go back and tell a young Todd Gordon one thing, we all asked our guests this every time. If you can go back and tell a young, Todd Gordon, Lucas DeWitt, young Matt, young Brian, go back and tell them one thing, what would you tell them? Well, I would tell myself to be patient. Be patient earlier in your career, especially with big decisions. It's okay to say, you know what? I don't know right now. I don't have an answer for you, but I'm going to find out, and I'm going to call you back. And then make sure you call them back, obviously. I had other people who, they tell you that once in a while, I'll call you back. You never heard from them. And I would have parents a coach would tell that to a parent. I'm going to call you back. Well, they never called the parent. I can't defend that. I could not defend that as an administrator. And I told the coaches that if you say you're going to do something, do it, but be patient and don't rush those big decisions. I think early in my career, I think I had to make a decision right away so many times. and that can come back and hurt you. So just sometimes take 12 hours, take 24 hours, even take an hour if you can. Now, we know there's times you've got to make the call and you got to make it right now. And those happen, and those come with experience too. But if it's a big decision, take your time and just be patient. The other thing I think I got better at as I got older was showing empathy and grace. And I feel like my leadership kind of went to another level once I started showing more empathy and more grace in some of the decisions that I made. They still sometimes had to be tough decisions, and they had to be suspensions, or they had to be, but if you could talk, I had so many valuable conversations with kids and coaches that ended up being tough decisions, but we came out of it okay because I think of how I approached it. I didn't approach it with a me versus them or a black and white. I think when we first start, we're black and white. And there are times, policy's policy, rules are rules, it's black and white. And you don't want to live in the gray, but sometimes you can talk in the gray and you can get to the black and white, if that makes sense. And I think that's where that empathy and grace, if you approach them, have those conversations, just have real, genuine conversations, I think that serves you well. Fourthly, think long term. It's an overused phrase, trust the process. Everybody uses it now in every athletic team, trust the process, but just think long term, just not short term. Think long term for your school. Where do you want that school to go? Where do you want your career to go? But just don't think so short term. Be a visionary. Man, just dream big, but have a plan. If you can make the dream, you can make the plan, and then you adjust the plan as you go. And you can't do it alone. If you're going to think long term, you've got to bring others alongside you. It can't be just you. I talked, earlier about knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses. Well, bring people alongside you. I'm thinking as an AD, I would bring coaches in. I would bring teachers into a discussion who might have some strength in some areas that I didn't. And so just strengthen the team, but don't try and do it all alone. But really think long term, have a vision for what you want to do, and then develop that plan to do it. And lastly, which is something, if anybody knows me at all, is I believe that moments are there, and you have to be intentional about the moments that are in front of you. Step into those moments. There's times where a moment passes and you think, I missed it. Don't miss them. You're going to miss some, but don't miss many. Embrace them. I mean, think about how you can help others experience those moments as well. One of the things I started doing the last few years was, if I would have a young coach, a first-year head coach, let's say, and they got their first varsity win, I got the game ball. Whether it was a basketball, a football, a softball, a volleyball, if we were on the road and I was there, I would get that ball. I stole the game ball from Ogden for our girls basketball coach. She got her first win. Well, I didn't steal it. I asked, and I replaced it. But it was on the road, and it was one of the funnest things. I'm not an English teacher. It was one of the most fun things I did. I had the game ball. The girls got in there. They got her first win, and I got to go in the locker room and present her that game ball. I mean, I got goosebumps now just thinking about it. Those are the moments. Think about how you can pull people into moments that they didn't know they were even going to experience. And as a leader, you have a great seat to watch kids have moments, adults have moments, parents have moments. How can you bring parents into those moments for those kids? Just be intentional about making the most of the moments that you're going to have with those people. Senior nights as an AD was one of my favorite nights ever. And you try to make those as special as you can, because it is a big deal. And so whatever you have in your school, whether you're a principal, you're going to have a chance to create moments for people, and just, man, just do it, because there are things they're going to remember for the rest of their lives. And to know that you have a hand in that and you can help create that, that's special, man. That's special. And you're going to make an impact in a lot of people's lives for that too. Real quick, I got about 2 minutes. I didn't think I could talk for 50, but I guess I can. Some people would say I can always talk for 50. The biggest challenges, well, I think the biggest opportunity you have is AI. You got a chance to use AI in ways that I never did. It wasn't even a thing, obviously, but we use it now at Bound a lot, and we're programming with it. But one of the ways, I would give you one name, whether you're an athletic director or whether you're an aspiring principal, Jacob Burke. If you look up Jacob Burke, he's written a couple books on AI. He was one of my assistant athletic directors at Roosevelt, and then he was the athletic director at Hoover, and now he's working in community ed in Des Moines Public Schools. But he has really embraced AI, and it's all about the prompt and learn how to write a prompt for AI. So I think you have an opportunity to help you write emails, help you write scripts. I mean, it's amazing what it can do. I love using it as well. And the biggest challenges, I think, is just it hasn't changed a whole lot, but I mean, parents are a part of the journey, and you can't fight that. They are. And so it's how can you make them allies and not adversaries? And again, it's relationships. And sometimes parents who can be the biggest adversary can become your biggest ally if you just stay consistent in how you approach them, how you treat them with respect and grace, but be firm. I think parents respect when an administrator is firm and they believe what they believe and they follow through. So they're a part of it, and you're just trying to help their kid. And I think if they realize that, if you keep doing it enough, they'll start to realize it. All of them, and I'm lying if I said, yeah, not maybe all of them, but 90% is not bad. I'll take that. That's better than hitting 300.
Welcome, Josh. It's a pleasure to introduce you here to BVU and our aspired administrators. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me. So my focus today is going to be mainly on administrator licensure, and then delve into some elements of professional ethics. Really just more focusing on those things that new administrators need to be aware of and need to have on the radar as they are starting in their first administrative position. Now, as a side note, I could spend an entire day focusing solely on professional ethics, but in the interest of time, we're going to address those elements that are considered mandatory reportable elements and violations of the Code of Conduct and Professional Ethic. But before that, I want to talk a little bit about our bureau. We are located downtown Des Moines. We are part of the Department of Education, but we are not located in the main the Grimes building, which is where all the other offices for the Department of Education are. We are off-site for the time being, but that remains to be seen how long we remain off-site. Our office hours are typical office hours Monday through Friday. One thing that people may not know is that we process at least 30,000 license applications every year. And in spite of that number, our goal is to always answer phone calls and emails within a 24-hour period. Now, I'll add to the fact that right now, in the months of May through about September, we've entered our busy season. So processing time might be a little delayed, and we can talk about that a little bit later. I want to explain the difference between the Bureau of Educational Examiners and the Board of Educational Examiners. They are two separate entities that fall under the same rules. So the Bureau is the part of the Department of Education. The board or the Bureau merged with the Department of Education about a year and a half ago, And so there's some structural similarities that exist there, but the board is a standalone entity, and I'll talk about that. So our office personnel consists of those people you see listed there. There are actually currently 4 consultants right now. We are in the process of hiring a 5th one. We had some turnover recently. Um, and I'll also say that all of the people that work in this bureau are fantastic people. However, you don't want to be in a position where you're meeting our attorney or our investigators, because that means that you are either party to or some way otherwise involved in an ethics complaint. But I assure you, they're very very kind people, and they do their job very well. Now, the Board of Educational Examiners is a standalone board. Um, all of which are appointed by the governor. Um, it consists of 4 classroom teachers, and one of those 4 is from an accredited non-public school. There are 4 practicing administrators. There are 4 members of the public that have never been in education or held a license issued by our bureau. And the requirement is that they have students that are currently school aged. And then there is the department or the director of the Department of Education or her designee. In this case, it's her designee, Eric St. Clair. Um, so it's kind of confusing because we have the bureau that used to be known as the board, but now the board is separate from the bureau in that it enacts its own rules, and is solely focused on professional conduct, and they hear matters of um, ethics violations complaints, but also review their own administrative rules from time to time. Now I want to spend a little bit of time focused on your initial administrator license. So upon conclusion of your program, I'll start at the bottom first. Even if you are not intending to go into administration right away, apply for your initial administrator license. And the reason is, and I've come across a couple of these in my role, uh, that someone had graduated from an admin prep program, didn't get their license 5, 7, 10 years ago, and now decided that they want to get into administration. Well, things have changed, both at the institutional levels, but also at the legislative levels, as far as what's required for an administrative license. So, what you don't want to get in, what you want to avoid is a situation where you might have to take additional coursework in order to get your administrator license. So, again, even if you don't want to go into administration right away, go ahead and apply just so you have it, and you don't have to worry about anything that changes along the way. You are able to renew your initial administrator license twice. The first time can be done without any additional paperwork or anything like that. You just pay the renewal fee. And the second time, you have to show that if you need a second time to renew, you have to show that you've been offered in a position of employment in a licensed administrative position. So it's okay if you apply for your license and you receive it, it expires because you're not looking to use it right away, that's completely fine. If you decide you want to get into administration and you are in the process of interviewing, you want that license active, then you can renew that, as I explained very simply. If for some reason you go through the interviews and the hiring and you don't obtain that administrative position, in order to renew it a second time, you have to have that offer of employment. You can also, just like the initial teaching license, it's also valid for substitute teaching if you so choose to go that route, but your standard license or your master educator license will grant you the same authority. Now, you convert your initial administrator license to the professional after you've completed your first year in a licensed administrative position, and that it means that you've been you've been subject to a comprehensive evaluation by your evaluator or your supervising administrator. They will complete a form on your behalf that will recommend you for the full license. And that can be submitted after the last student day of the year. So depending on when that falls, um, usually late May, early June. I know that there will be questions about, well, my initial license expires on June 30th. Um, we process the conversion license or the conversion applications as quickly as possible. So you can expect to see those in 5 to 7 business days, generally speaking. Now, if you find yourself in a position where you're wanting to move into a different realm of administration, so if you want to pursue a superintendent degree, you are able to apply for a conditional Class B administrator license after you've completed at least 75% of the program. And you do have to have an offer of employment in a position that requires that endorsement. That will be valid for 2 years then, and assuming you've completed all of the requirements, then you can apply to have that uh, endorsement added to your license. Just a couple other things about licensing, processing, and fees. Uh, Please do allow up to 6 and even up to 8 weeks for processing time, especially for renewals. This is the time of year that we see a lot of the renewals come in, as well as the conversions from the initial teacher to the standard teaching, from the standard to the master educator. We also see my workflow is full of conversion applications for the initial administrator. So, as I said, that this is the busier time of year for us. Um, if you find yourself in a position where your license is close to expiration, this is more in the case of during the school year. If you find yourself in a position where your license is close to expiration, you can apply for an extension. That'll grant an extra year of eligibility on your license while you finish up the requirements for the renewal. Those are usually processed within 2 to 3 days. The reason for that, for the quicker turnaround, is that we do not have to conduct background checks on those, so you're not charged that. Um, if you're wanting to add an endorsement and anything else that involves a transcript evaluation, that can take up to 3 weeks depending on volume. All of this is really depending on volume. What I'll say about license renewals in particular is that you can renew as early as a year from the expiration date. Um, so anytime after the start of the month following your birth month, a year from your expiration date, you can apply it to renew. That ensures plenty of time for the consultants to review your applications, to correct any deficiencies, and ensure that you have your license back in a timely manner, and you're not in a position where you need that extension. Last part is just listing out our fee schedule. If you find yourself without a license, if you let your license expire without renewing, there is a $25 per month late fee that has to be paid prior to that license being issued. You can also, not only will you be fined for that or have to pay those late fees, but you also run the risk of being subject to an ethics violation, which we'll get into a little bit later. But the rest of the fees are kind of laid out there. These are also spelled out on every application as far as how much you're needing to pay for those applications to go through. So that's all I had for the area of administrator licensure. What questions might there be?
So just to clarify again for everyone, so let's say that I'm a year into my program, but I have 50% of my coursework done. I can't apply for a job until I've actually completed 75% of my coursework for an administrator job, correct?
So that's actually if you're adding an administrative endorsement.
Okay.
Um, for a conditional, well, there really isn't the conditional licensure for an administrator. You have to be recommended by the school for the license and the endorsement. It's not the same as a teaching endorsement because a teaching license and the administrator license are different credentials, so they're not interchangeable. The Class B is only um, in cases where there has been enough coursework finished and they're eligible to start that position early. Let me rephrase that my statement, Lucas. I misspoke. There is that eligibility for the conditional licensure because I've seen a lot of applications recently where principals have gotten their Class B and are able to circumvent getting the initial administrator license. After serving a year on a Class B, they can convert to the professional with some additional paperwork.
Okay.
So yes, my apologies.
Nope, that's great.
After
Thanks.
50%, then they can make that recommendation from
Okay.
the college to say that they're this far in. Um, and I should have known that because I did that. So, but that was a long time ago. So yes, thank you for that question.
Yep.
Anything else about licensure?
I guess, you know, talking to you and having you here, I think it's just good to remind people that yes, you guys are swamped and yes, you're busy. But based on my own personal experiences, that you do follow through with that 24-hour email response and are timely with helping with their needs. So if you get into situations or questions, you definitely encourage us to reach out to you.
Yes, please. Yeah, 100%. And if you're calling us, please leave a message. So that's a guarantee that you will hear from us. I I had a colleague today receive 33 phone calls from the same person, but at no point did they leave a message. So, um, yeah, please do call us. Maybe not 33 times, but do call and leave a message. Or if you prefer to email, that's fine too. We'll try to match your communication preference.
Thank you, Josh. That's great.
Sure. Okay, if there are no other questions about administrator licensure, we're going to talk with some depth about the the code of conduct, professional ethics, and license sanctions. I'm going to go a little bit out of order from what's on that slide, but separating really helping to delineate between the code of conduct and the professional ethics. Think of the code of conducts as shall and shall nots, mostly the shall nots. These are things we can and cannot do, focused specifically on protecting students. All of these components that make up the code of conduct and our professional ethics are those things that are designed to protect students. Now, professional ethics, you would think is a little more straightforward, but the reality is, I like to use this illustration of this continuum here. We like to think that everything is either black or red, but the reality is, especially as administrators, we live in this gray area a lot. Not everything is going to be cut and dry. There are certain elements of the code of conduct. Certainly your district and building policies are going to be a little more black and white, but ethics are contextual and they are subjective. And so they're more about rather than hard and fast uh, code of conduct, they're more shared principles that help us to mitigate risk. So you're operating on this continuum of risk. I think the research shows that the average educator makes anywhere from 700 to 1,500 decisions a day. Now you factor in the ethical angle to all of those decisions too. It's not always cut and dry, and we'll talk about some of those things moving through this. I want to talk first about the complaint process, most notably those that can file complaints. I put this bullet point first, a parent of a child directly involved first, because we are seeing a significant increase in in complaints being filed by parents on behalf of their children. And it's seldom just one person that is subject to the complaint. In a lot of cases, we're seeing the classroom teacher um, is being subject to the complaint, but in the same complaint, it's being lodged against the classroom teacher. If there's a licensed para in the room, special education director, dean of students, principal, superintendent, anyone that might even be remotely related to the case. So I have one colleague, one investigator who's conducting an investigation in a district um, where 3 families filed complaints on 18 educators. So it's kind of throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Um, the number of complaints that we receive, or actually the number of cases that are heard on an annual basis, have gone from about 40 10 years ago to more than 300 today. We're on track to have another 300 case year again. So this is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's good in the sense that we have parents that are cognizant of this process, that they want to advocate for their children, and keep in mind that all of these that these elements of code of conduct and professional ethics are designed to keep students safe. And so again, it's a good thing in the sense that we have people that are more aware of this the being able to raise these concerns through the proper channels. But on the other hand, it creates a lot of it's more work, obviously. Our investigative staff has doubled in the less than a year that I've been here. So there's an uptick in in the cases being filed, in the complaints that have to be heard, that they go to hearing. Other entities that can file a complaint are the Department of Education. Our bureau can file complaints against educators. If you are a behind the wheel instructor, the Department of Transportation can file a complaint against you. And if you are delinquent in your taxes or other state owed fees, the Department of Revenue can also file a complaint against your license. I also want to emphasize this third bullet point, that anyone that holds a license issued by our bureau can file a complaint. Now, this is tricky, perhaps for those that are still teachers, especially if you're new to the district or anything like that. You don't want to cause waves. You don't want to, um, make any enemies in your district. But the fact is, we have that professional responsibility to uphold that code of conduct and adhere to professional ethics, even if it means doing hard things. And that's going to have to be the case when you're in administration. I'm not saying that from day one you're going to have to file complaints, all day long. That's not necessarily the case, but you have to be ready for that. Especially as we get into areas of mandatory report for administrators. This is all going to be focused on things that you, as a building principal or other administrator in a district, has a requirement to file a complaint with our bureau within 30 days of a disciplinary action being taken at the building or district level against a teacher. Before we get into that, I want to look at the complaint process. This graphic is very messy and busy for a reason, and that's because the process can be just that. Complaints are received by our executive director and board secretary and attorney. They are reviewed to determine if there is if we have jurisdiction, first of all, um, to proceed with the complaint. If that's the case, then it is assigned to an investigator. The investigator completes his or her investigation and then presents their findings to the board. The rule there is they have to be filed and brought before the board within 180 days of inception. So from the time that it goes to the investigator to the time it gets before the board for hearing, or not for hearing, for determination, um, that's 180 days. And there can be some um, extensions to that with mitigating circumstances, whether it be because of the length and the depth of the investigation or because of the the respondent's attorney, if they decide that they want more time to pursue this. So if the case is if the board does not find probable cause, it is dismissed, and there is no record of anything on an educator's license. Once the board accepts it as as probable cause for an ethical violation, there is notification that is placed on the educator's license that's available online, and that is when there is a hearing notice. We see a lot of cases go to settlement rather than going into the administrative law judge hearing. Um, so a lot stop right here with settlement, and that's the kind of thing that can take quite a long time. What takes even longer is when we get into these cases, or if there are criminal elements involved too. There are some cases that can go on for 2, 3 years before it's finally solved. So um, again, this is just a brief overview of the major parts of the complaint process. There are 4 different kinds of sanctions that are really 3 sanctions that can appear on a license. Again, if it's dismissed at the board level, or if it doesn't meet the requirements or jurisdictional means for our bureau, then they are dismissed and there's no record showing on the license. The most common is going to be the letter of reprimand. Usually that's accompanied with some kind of additional training, like an ethics for educators or um, some other remedy. The more significant consequences are the suspension and then the outright revocation, which means that to be revoked means you can't ever hold a teaching license or a coaching license or an authorization in the state of Iowa. Suspensions also usually accompany some other kind of training or remediation, and that can vary from a matter of days to several months. It all depends on the nature of the infraction and um, what the administrative law judge decides. As I said, license sanctions are all public record. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a case where a person was found to be in violation of professional ethics or guilty, if you will. So if you see this public note right here, this just indicates that that the board found probable cause for a professional ethics violation and a hearing had been set. Now, again, this doesn't mean that they have been found guilty or that they have been found having violated professional ethics. However, you have to consider the ramifications of this. If you are in a position where you're searching for a job, or on the opposite end as an administrator, if you're hiring someone, this might give you pause. Again, it doesn't mean, they're innocent until proven guilty. But the public perception of this too. Now we're getting into, organizational politics. If you know that this is public information, you have a parent in the district that is concerned about certain things, well, they can bring this up. So you have I mean, this is one of those gray areas. You can say, yes, this is a highly qualified teacher. Just because they've been ordered for hearing doesn't mean that that they're guilty of anything. Now, if there is a disciplinary action taken, you can access all of the board orders online. Um, and if you haven't done so, you can spend some time on our website searching for license sanctions, and you search by the administrative rules. So in this case, 2B, this is related to drugs and alcohol. So this person it has been set for hearing because of a possible or probable violation of Standard 2, which is tied to drug and alcohol abuse and being present on school grounds when intoxicated. Before I get into the areas of mandatory report, are there any questions about the process? Seeing none, I will move on to the next part. So these 6 areas, we're not going to get into all of the different criteria or even all 8 of the standards for the code of conduct and professional ethics. So I'm just going to focus on those areas that are required to be reported if a staff member is reprimanded at the district or building level for violating any one of these things. This first one seems pretty self-explanatory. What I want to emphasize with standard 1 is that this element here of otherwise inappropriate relationship, that means that this relationship does not need to be sexual in nature for it to be inappropriate. That's anything that would demonstrate any kind of grooming behavior. That's new language that's been added. Think of grooming as anything that seeks to break down the professional barriers between students and teachers in an effort to take advantage of that student in some way, shape, or form. Again, this is one of those gray areas. Inappropriate is a very loaded word. There are cases that are cut and dry, and but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them live in that gray area. A little piece of trivia. I want you to think for a moment with regard to Standard 1. What year did this become an area of mandatory reporting for districts? Keep in mind that the professional standards have been enacted since 1974 in Iowa.
Hasn't it been fairly recent that they made this a requirement because of the national database for things? Or am I off?
Yes,
Okay.
you're exactly right. It is shockingly recent, 2012. So up until then, districts did not have to report disciplinary infractions involving a teacher having an inappropriate relationship. I'll back that up. Specifically, a sexual relationship with students until 2012. I'll pause really with any of these things and just say there is nothing more important than you can do as a hiring administrator than doing background checks, both to references, but also looking at digital footprints. Iowa Courts Online is free, but those background checks and doing your legwork can save a lot of headaches down the road.
Yeah, that is just mind-boggling, actually, that it's that recent. But hey, I'm glad it's there now. We'll just leave it at that.
That's right. Yes. Okay. Next one. This is an area that we see affecting a lot of special education teachers. falsifying grades, test scores, or other information or material. This is going to be in the realm of IEPs, progress monitoring data in particular, um, but also cases of students' grades being changed without the proper authority, um, giving giving students test answers, anything along those lines. Um, and it says other information or material. That's not just related to student grades or test scores. That's anything within the realm of your role as a teacher. So if you are, um, subject to an investigation of any kind and you're dishonest about that, that could come back to you as a violation of Standard 3. The next one pertains to Standard 4, converting public property or funds to the personal use of the school employee. I will say that a lot of these kinds of complaints come out of the extracurricular area. Um, there are cases of coaches that run camps that aren't adhering to proper accounting procedures. There have been cases where a teacher who's been working gate duty at a basketball game just pocketed, $1,000 in cash and uh, left the building. But there's still more nuance to this. Think about anyone who utilizes their school-issued computer to sell things on eBay or to run an internet-based business. That would be a violation of this. Think also about in cases of music teachers or anyone that's tutoring, using the school space, the school's instruments, um, without proper permission. You could run the risk of this as well. Next one down again should be pretty straightforward, but it's there because people have violated it, and we have seen these cases go down, like the volume of these particular cases go down, but they are still present. Um, with this Standard 2 being on school premises or at a school-sponsored activity involving students. So this means that it may not necessarily be in your position as in a supervisory role. It might mean that you're not even on campus, um, or even at your own district. You don't you're allowed to have your private life, but make sure that you're not allowing that to bleed into your professional life. Um, it's probably not okay to go after school on Friday before a football game to have drinks with your colleagues and then show up at the football game, even though you're there as a spectator, and if it's in the community you live in as a parent and taxpayer, you are still a licensed educator um, at a school-sponsored activity. Students are going to be present, parents are going to be present. Um, there are cases where there were elementary teachers that went for drinks before an elementary band concert and came back and got caught with that. Um, Coaches that have been on scouting trips ended up getting caught after having a couple beers uh, before the game that they went to scout. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. We have these things in place, as I said before, to help mitigate risk that could befall you, but more importantly, to help protect the health and safety of students. The second to last one, discrimination on the basis of free speech or intellectual freedom. This one is fairly new. This was added in 2021, I believe. But this ties back to Standard 6. So any case where there is a perception of discrimination because of a student's views or that the kinds of things that they say in class can be subject to this violation of this standard. And the last one is student abuse, anything that really fails to protect the health and safety of students. Any questions about these violations? Okay. This is more of maybe a thought experiment for you, watching this after the fact. But it's basically the same slide. But I came across this exercise as credited to Doctors Grant and Haverland, called the breadcrumbs exercise. And it harkens back to the Hansel and Gretel story of them leaving breadcrumbs from their home, but looking at it in a different context. And that is, when looking at these 6 standards, I want you to think about what breadcrumbs you would see as an administrator that would lead to uncovering a possible violation, or more importantly, preventing a violation from happening. What are some of the signs that you would look for? Um, that would, what does an inappropriate relationship with a student look like or sound like? Um, what are some things that might lead to a misuse of public property or funds? What responsibility do you have in regards to ensuring that your teachers and other licensed staff members aren't under the influence of drugs and alcohol while on school premises? So that this is something that I would encourage you to engage in with your colleagues and with your educator friends, to kind of look at these what breadcrumbs might be there, what little clues might lead to something unfortunate.
Jack, I appreciate that as far as just looking for possibilities. I also think as a new principal coming in, what you brought up is that some teachers, even though they license renewal every so years and they're required to read their code of ethics, um,
Hmm.
as a leader in your school, you need to be reminding and bringing those up and talking about them, and not just assuming that they're reading those in their licensure packet and what gets sent to them. Because I'm amazed when I've worked with teachers how some of them, when you bring up these examples, oh, not that they're shocking, but I think some
Hmm.
are like, oh, I guess I never thought of it that way. That they need that reminder and need to understand that there is a code of ethics out there. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, I know every student takes that in their ethics class in college and their teacher prep, but it means a little bit more now when you're in the field,
Hmm.
that those reminders seem to weigh heavier.
Yeah, for sure. And this is something that I learned from other practitioners. I wish I would have done this more when I was serving as a principal, but um, there are 8 standards related to the Code of Conduct and Professional Ethics. You have approximately 8 to 9 months of school every year. Given, I would think, at least a monthly staff meeting, pick a standard each month and run through some scenarios, have some conversations about it, because as Lucas said, the more it's discussed, the more awareness it brings to these issues, and the more likely people will be to speak up when they see something not right. And that's key to looking for these breadcrumbs and preventing things before they get to a point of irreparable damage, to not just to the educator, but more importantly to the students. Kind of along those same lines, not just for the breadcrumbs, but also in a preventative manner. In addition to having these discussions, I want you to think about practices that you can employ in your buildings that would help prevent these kinds of things. One that I want to focus on here is this idea of falsifying student grades, test scores, or other information or material. I think about the tremendous pressure that special education teachers are under on a regular basis when it comes to maintaining their data and updating progress monitoring. That is one of the areas where a lot of complaints are brought because there hasn't been proper accounting of student progress. One thing that you can do as an administrator is, first of all, you have to keep in touch with your teachers and you have to know where they are and what their needs are. But make it known to them that if they need, like an afternoon to get caught up on their progress monitoring, that you can cover their classroom. That's going to go a long way. Not only is it, you know, making that taking that preventative step in the teacher falling behind and putting themselves in a position where they feel like they have no other choice but to do this because of that pressure and because of that requirement. But you're also helping to foster that relationship and build trust with that teacher to know that you want them to be successful, that you've taken steps to ensure that they're able to do their jobs um, well and with support.
Josh, I really appreciate that insight. And, as a principal, you're going to find your bigger issues and problems that come about oftentimes are around special education and procedures and policies, how that works. I'm so glad you mentioned have a good relationship with your special ed teachers and to check in with them. And for you as an administrator to know how the students are progressing is key. But man, that's just $1 million wisdom to say, talk to your teachers about, hey, if you need me to cover or if we need to find a sub, because special ed paperwork can't get just brushed aside. It's not something that you can pick up later. You have got to be on it. And so administratively, if you see all that's going on, any supports you can offer to make that happen it just has to happen. So
Right.
great insight, Josh. Appreciate that.
Thank you. I guess I'll close out the ethics part here with just some recommendations for you, and I'll leave you to read it. Um, as I mentioned with that fourth one, to encourage transparency, and that's having those discussions, not keeping things hidden away, put it out in the open so people are more comfortable around um, these uncomfortable things. Because we have to be willing, as educators, we have to be willing to talk about these things in order to mitigate them and to avoid them as much as we can. Um, we don't get into this field if we didn't care about kids. And in some cases, that care can can uh, be caught up in a situation where you're blurring professional boundaries. So it's important that you show your students your care, so they know that you care and that you want to connect with them. But you also have a responsibility to do so within professional boundaries, not just for their benefit, but also for yours. I like to use the example of, giving a student a ride home. You know, a person's heart is in the right place when they want to do that, especially when there are other circumstances where the student may not be picked up for a couple hours, and it's 11 o'clock at night after an activity and the school is locked and it's raining. There's all these different things can happen, but you have to think about what the boundaries are and what the risks are. So think about those aspects and take these recommendations for what they are. Um, the last thing that I'll leave you with, just because I was asked to provide some thoughts for aspiring administrators. I was a junior high and high school principal for 11 years before coming to the Bureau. And what I want to emphasize is listening. I mean, that's a pretty common thing. It's key to creating relationships, to fostering trust, but it's more than just, hey, you need to listen to this or whatever. So you listen to the people that are in your care. even if what they had to say may not be very nice or even relevant to what's happening, but there's there's a reason they're telling you something. So be present with them when they bring concerns to you. Listen for not just the breadcrumbs that I mentioned earlier, but also the good things. Listen for those parts of your building, your staff, your students that make your building and district special. You can a lot publicity that you take on your own um, is going to go a lot farther than waiting for someone to publicize things for you. So listen for those things that make your district and your students and your staff special, while also listening for those things that maybe you need to address before they get into something bigger. And the last thing I'll say is that you have to listen through the noise, because people are going to bring a lot of stuff to you and they may not be very happy. So you have to be ready for that. But I encourage you to listen through to hear what they're actually wanting to tell you. Most cases, people just want to be heard when they're upset or they're frustrated. So it takes a thick skin to be a school administrator, and it gets easier with time. But if you pause and listen listen for what they want to tell you, that's going to go a long way in resolving those things. And I'll leave with my contact information. What
Josh,
other questions can I answer at this point, or other points that you might want to bring up?
well, Josh, I just wanted to say thank you. I don't have any additional questions. I think this has been just profound with going through each of the things, and I appreciate your thoughts at the end for us to think about. There's no question being an administrator, as you said, takes tough, thick skin. But as you said, people want to be heard, and if you can get through all that and form a common ground that, hey, we care about your kid. What is the situation here? How can we work together? It can go a long way. So I appreciate that insight.
Very good. Thank you.
Uh, Thanks for your contact information. If any of our
Mhm.
students have questions, I'm sure they'll reach out.
Yep, please do. For any questions whatsoever. Whether it's about administrative licensure, I'm the consultant in the office that processes administrative licensure. I also do behind the wheel authorizations and out of country applicants too. So as we're looking to increase that teacher pipeline, that's one avenue that we're looking to continue working on.
Thank you, Josh.